Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. It's Houston, Texas, and it's where the future of IndyCar racing is being decided. Will it continue to be controlled by CART, or will the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and its president, Tony George, have a greater voice? Meanwhile, Michael Andretti takes home a record $2.4 million for his first championship. And all Dale Earnhardt has to do is flip the starting switch in Atlanta a week from Sunday, and he'll win his 5th Winston Cup title. These stories and much more tonight on Speed Week.
Speed Week is brought to you by Dodge, a great way to rediscover American value.
Hi, everyone, from Houston, Texas. Welcome to Speed Week. I'm Bob Jenkins. This was the scene yesterday of a meeting by CART IndyCar owners in which they heard a proposal from Indianapolis Motor Speedway President Tony George that could change the face of IndyCar racing in the United States. They also heard a plea to reinstate the Cleveland Grand Prix to the CART schedule. We'll have complete coverage of this historic meeting on tonight's show. But first, in order to understand where IndyCar racing may be headed, I think it's important to understand from where it has come. From 1902 through 1955, championship auto racing in the United States was sanctioned by the Contest Board of the American Automobile Association. But due to several factors, including the high fatality rate in the sport, AAA decided to get out of auto racing. As a result of a meeting in September of 1955 called by Indianapolis Motor Speedway owner Tony Hulman, the United States Auto Club was formed and began sanctioning events in 1956. The 21-member board was responsible not only for making decisions about IndyCar racing, but also sprints, midgets, and stock cars. Their reign continued until 1979. At that time, a group of car owners led by Dan Gurney, Pat Patrick, and Roger Penske formed championship auto racing teams, saying they weren't adequately being represented on the USAC board. CART's first race was at Phoenix in April of '79. With the Indy 500 continuing to be sanctioned by USAC, CART owners withheld their entries into the '79 500 until shortly before the deadline. The Speedway rejected the entries and a court case ensued. Represented by Detroit attorney John Frasco, the car owners won the battle when a judge ruled in their favor on May 5th. An attempt was made in 1980 to bring USAC and CART together under one roof. The Championship Racing League, where the 6-member board was formed and sanctioned the first 5 races that year, including Indianapolis. USAC withdrew from the league, however, and with the exception of the Indy 500, IndyCar racing has been in the hands of CART ever since. Originally, CART was controlled by an 11-member board, but now all 24 teams that own a CART franchise make the rules. Now, 24 teams are fine for smaller races, but when Indianapolis Motor Speedway President Tony George was faced with the possibility of having fewer than 33 cars for his 500 this past year, he decided to do something about it. And that's what led us to this meeting of CART owners. We still have not been officially told what George's proposal contains, but we have learned it calls for the establishment of a 7-member board called IndyCar Inc. At the top of the chart is a commissioner, George, once Goodyear's director of racing, Leo Mell. The only other person that we know of that would be on the board would be George himself. His proposal pledges to car owners unity, representation, balance, accountability, and efficiency. At mid-afternoon, behind tightly sealed doors, Tony Bentonhausen, Jim Hall, and other car owners began hearing George's proposal. 90 minutes later, while TV reporters waited for a statement, George and his delegation left through a rear door and headed for a private conference. Shortly thereafter, the Speedway president and CART board chairman Bill Stokan briefed us on the results of the meeting. And as you're about to hear, they each had differing views as to what happened.
I think all of you should be aware of the fact that the proposal that Tony has brought forth has been quite well received by the owners. As usually happens in situations like this, there's always a little bit of clarification, new issues to be brought to the table, but I would say that it seems like the beginning of a process that I think both of us would like to see come to a conclusion as soon as possible. Thank you.
Well, I did, in fact, make a presentation to the owners today that for all intents and purposes, was rejected, and right now we're considering getting together to try and establish exactly what are the issues now as far as they're concerned, and listen to what amounts to a counter proposal.
George admitted that car owners had very little time to study this sweeping proposal.
We were cautiously optimistic going in. I don't think we are surprised by the fact that we're disappointed. It's just the fact that I think we made a good faith attempt to try and get things started off on the right foot, and from what I hear, the meeting was productive, so maybe that is a good sign.
Most of what was proposed, I think, has been received as it had been delivered, with all the hard work and all the integrity that has gone into it. And that is, there is an enormous amount of good material and a good start. And now it's up to our side to get back to the Speedway with some modifications to the plan as we see it.
And so the two will continue to meet and work on a compromise. But for right now, nothing has changed in IndyCar racing. We'll be back with more Speed Week from Houston, Texas in just a moment.
Speed Week is brought to you by Quaker State. The Big Q is one tough motor oil. By Dodge, a great way to rediscover American value. And by Aladdin Industries, maker of the Aladdin Stanley all-steel thermos.
Coming up is the Cleveland IndyCar race, go or no-go for 92.
It's one of the most technologically advanced, most rigorously tested fluids on Earth, relentlessly measured for maximum protection against the friction, the wear and tear, the heat and stress of today's engines. It is today's Quaker State. In Europe, in Japan, in America, Quaker State quality has passed the most demanding tests automakers can throw at it. At Quaker State, we don't just say we're tough, we're tested tough. The Big Q is one tough motor oil.
Dodge Daytonas now start at under $11,000 and go all the way up to 149 miles an hour. Introducing the new Dodge Daytona IROC RT. 224 horses, 16 valves, and 0 to 60 in 6.7 seconds. And now get air conditioning at no extra charge on selected Daytonas.
What's up, Helen? Guess I've had this old Stanley about 6 years now. Boys, been through it. Been dropped, run over, beat up. You name it, it's been through it. There's not another thermos anywhere that can take it like this one. See what I mean?
The Aladdin Stanley all-steel thermos, guaranteed for life.
Indianapolis, Daytona, Talladega, Pomona, Baja. Why do we go to such distant places to put Craftsman tools to the test? If you're going to guarantee a tool forever, it's got to take the torture even guys like you dish out. 1,600 Craftsman hand tools, made in America, guaranteed forever, only at Sears. Besides, this kind of testing is fun.
Topic of discussion at the kart owners meeting here in Houston yesterday, which was held at the Hyatt Regency Hotel just back of me, was Tony George's proposal. However, the board also heard a plea from a delegation from the Budweiser Cleveland Grand Prix to put their race back on the schedule. It was taken off of the calendar during an owners meeting at Nazareth. Welcomed by Chairman Bill Stokan, Cleveland Mayor Mike White led the 13-member contingent, which had been working since the Nazareth vote to, among other things, find more money for the race purse. It didn't take long for the kart board to reach a unanimous decision.
The owners are very happy to announce that we will be back in Cleveland. We have a logistical problem for 1992 in the sense that we have already a full contingency of venues, But the 4th of July weekend, which has been the traditional date for Cleveland, has been guaranteed for 1993. And we will further do our best to also see if we can find a date, if at all possible, for the 1992 season.
What this means is that another race must drop from the schedule before Cleveland can run its event in '92. Any possibilities?
Well, it's public knowledge that the Denver promoter has filed for Chapter 11 protection. And obviously, it would be out of line for us to speculate on the outcome of their reorganization when they will go in front of the judge. There are a couple of other venues also that might be willing to work with us.
When the Cleveland Grand Prix does go back on the schedule, it will carry a $1 million purse. And so, as a member of Roger Penske's delegation told me just before he left the Hyatt Regency, stay tuned. Turning now to Winston Cup racing, all Dale Earnhardt has to do a week from Sunday at the Hardee's 500 in Atlanta is start the race in order to win his 5th title. He came close but failed to clinch the championship last Sunday at the Pie Royal 500 at Phoenix International Raceway. Here's the story from Dr. Jerry Punch.
Earnhardt started 12th and Ricky Rudd, his closest points competitor, 14th, as Jeff Bodine led the 43-car field to the next to the last green flag of the year. There were a record number of cautions in the race, this one involving Bobby Hamilton, Jeff Purvis, and Bill Sedgwick, who by starting clinched the Winston West Championship. Bodine's chances of winning $167,200 in Unocal bonus money were set back when he spun while leading, but eventually fought back for an 8th place finish. Even Earnhardt was the cause of one of the caution periods when he spun in turn 4. Dale was fighting an ill-handling race car at the time, but came back to finish 9th. Rudd, who has a history of doing poorly here, had his best Phoenix finish ever at 11th place, but it dropped him to 3rd in the point standings. The race's biggest crash was triggered when Brett Bodine and Harry Gant got together coming out of turn 4. Before it was over, Richard Petty, Dave Marcus, Herschel McGriff, and Gary Collins were all involved. There were no injuries. Davey Allison took the lead just before the halfway point and would give it up only during pit stops as he cruised to his 5th win of the year, tying him with Gant for the most wins in 1991.
Here we are, 13th season in racing as a driver. We started 13th, and that's our 13th Winston Cup win. So what more could you ask for?
The win moved Davey to 2nd in the points, 156 behind Earnhardt. And now Allison is the only one with a shot at Dale. But it's a long shot. As long as Earnhardt can remember to start his car at Atlanta, he'll win the $1 million prize that accompanies the 1991 Winston Cup Championship. For Speed Week, I'm Jerry Punch.
The Winston Cup Manufacturers title will also go to the final race in Atlanta. Chevy, seeking its 9th straight championship, has a 6-point lead over Ford. In order to stop the streak, Ford would have to win the race, and Chevy finish no better than 5th. Our Rick DeBrule was at the Winston Cup race at Phoenix and found a situation that hasn't occurred in 35 years.
Well, by now you probably no doubt heard that for the first time since the 1950s, there were 3 brothers racing in one NASCAR event at the same time. Rusty, Kenny, and Mike Wallace. What was probably lost in all that excitement was the fact that Mike Wallace was driving the number 52 car, and that means Jimmy Means wasn't. For 15 years, Means has run his team as an owner-driver, an independent, squeaking by in whatever winnings and sponsorship he could pull together. Now he says it's time to change.
I've been surviving all these years doing it myself, and I'm looking for enough money that I can put some money in the car so I can concentrate on the other things, what it takes to run a team, versus what I'm doing now in the past, trying to drive it, own it, manage it, and the whole deal. So
his best finish ever was a 7th at Talladega back in 1983. Over the years, he's managed to win $1.5 million. But it's not enough, and losing his Alka-Seltzer sponsorship has made him realize that it's time to move up or out. So in Phoenix, for the first time, Jimmy had a driver. He's hoping that the combination of Mike Wallace's skill and the publicity of being yet another Wallace brother will help lure a sponsor.
He's got the greatest equipment out there. He's got a real nice shop, everything else, and I don't know, I'll sum Jimmy up. I think he'll be another Richard Childress in years to come.
It was not a great debut for the new Jimmy Means team. Mechanical problems had them behind the wall for a while, although they did finally make it back out and finish the race.
But what if the sponsors don't come through?
Well, I think we'll go to Daytona because it pays enough money to race. But as far as running week in and week out like we have for the past 16 years, there's no way we can do it. There's a lot of guys in the garage here the same way. Unless they can find some bucks to run with, we won't be back.
And for the independents, that could mean the end of an era. In Phoenix, I'm Rick Dubrul reporting for Speedweek.
Gary Nelson, the crew chief on the Sabco Pontiac driven by Kyle Petty, will leave that position at the end of the year. He'll become NASCAR's technical director and work under Vice President Dick Beatty.
Next, Amato loses but wins a record 4th Top Fuel Championship. And after 14 laps of slipping and sliding, the Australian Grand Prix is halted.
I, Chuck Callahan, will see to it that you get the best buy or trade on a new car or truck or a clean used car with good service after the sale. After over 25 years in the Ford business, I pride myself in service and sales. Try me. I promise, if it's not a Chuck Callahan Ford price, then you really don't have a price. 6105 East 38th Street. Think about it.
I've spent a lot of time up in the wild blue yonder. That's a place where up to 42% of the heat from your gas furnace can go if it's 10 years old. Change to a new Bryant Plus 90 gas furnace. It's 96% fuel efficient.
Call Smith & Son, where you're #1 for a $150 rebate on a new Bryant high-efficiency Plus 90 gas furnace. They're made in Indianapolis, and gas is naturally your best energy value. Smith & Son, heating and air conditioning for over 55 years. 631-5941.
The big game is here. College football on ESPN. It's bad.
Saturday, 3 key conference showdowns. Shane Matthews leads Florida against Georgia. Clemson tries to rip through North Carolina, and Ohio State takes on Minnesota. The big games are here in a live triple header. College football on ESPN.
Welcome back to Houston, Texas, the home of A.J. Foyt. It's also the home of the Astrodome. That was the site of the first indoor dirt midget race, and it was won by A.J. Foyt. Another racing legend, 59-year-old Don Garlitz, will come out of retirement next month and run at the Snowbird Nationals in Bradenton, Florida. The 3-time NHRA Top Fuel champion also hopes to run at least 4 regular races next year, sponsorship permitting. After a 1-week delay because of rain, the 27th annual NHRA Winston Finals were held last weekend in Pomona, California. Championships in 2 divisions were decided, Funny Car and Top Fuel.
Darrell Alderman in the near lane had already clinched the Pro Stock title, and with the pressure off, met Jerry Ekman in the finals. When Ekman left the line too early, the red light signaled another win for Alderman, his 11th out of 18 races, a new record. In Funny Cars, it was #1 qualifier Ed the Ace McCulloch in the far lane versus Al Hoffman, who had beaten new champion John Force on his way to the finals. The Ace got off the line first, but despite some slippery track conditions, Hoffman powered past to take his 2nd straight win. In the Top Fuel finals, it was Pat Austin against Kenny Bernstein. The young Washington driver won his 2nd of the year, avenging his loss to Bernstein in the finals of the U.S. Nationals. Kenny had earlier won the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic held on Saturday. Austin spoke with Steve Evans afterwards.
I hope next year in the 1992 season, I hope we can be competitive in Top Fuel and maybe get somebody, you know, Joe Amato, the world champion in 1991, a run for his money in the World Championship.
I'm sure you couldn't see him. Maybe you heard him. Had you made any mistake, Bernstein was right there.
Yeah, I knew the car would run good. Those guys are smart guys, and they got Wes Cerny and Dale Armstrong. I got Walt Austin and Lee Beard. Stand back.
Despite a 2nd-round loss, Joe Amato won the 1991 Top Fuel Championship for a record 4th time.
3 other people, myself, Don Garlitz, and Charlie Muldowney, that have won 3, and this kind of puts us with a new mark on the wall. I guess in the future there'll be guys shooting for it. We're not done yet, though, Steve. You know, I'm not old enough to retire, and I plan on, you know, trying to come back next year and defend our championship and maybe make it 3 in a row and a 5th world championship. I mean, that's what drag racing is all about, and that's what motivates Joe Amato. I mean, what we did now is history. We're looking forward.
It's interesting to note that all 3 professional NHRA categories had the same champions this year as they did last year. Amato in Top Fuel, John Force in Funny Car, and Darrell Alderman in Pro Stock. You'll recall 2 years ago at the Grand Prix of Australia in Adelaide, a torrential downpour caused problems for many drivers, including Ayrton Senna. But the race continued, and Terry Boutsen won it driving for Williams. This year, there was more bad weather. Bob Varsha reports on the shortest Formula One race in history.
From his milestone 60th pole position, newly crowned world champion Ayrton Senna led the field into a wall of spray with the expected results. Within a dozen laps, the Adelaide circuit was littered with 10 broken race cars, victims of the driver's struggles against the tractionless conditions. At the front, Senna hooked up with Nigel Mansell to decide the Constructors' Championship between their McLaren and Williams teams. That battle went on despite the presence of safety workers on the track in the blinding conditions. Ferrari Jean Alesi stated the obvious.
You know, really crazy to do a racing like that because we don't know if the interest of racing is more safety or more show. That is very dangerous.
On lap 15, Mansell crashed hard, injuring his foot, while Gerhard Berger flew off at great speed. Leader Senna pleaded with officials to stop the race, and they did. After 50 minutes of waiting for the rain to stop, the red flag waved for good. Senna had his first Australian Grand Prix win, while Mansell kept second despite his crash. Nelson Piquet finished fourth in what may be his last Formula One race, while Gianni Morbidelli took sixth, standing in for the fired Alain Prost at Ferrari. All in all, a sad ending to a bizarre season in Formula One. Senna has his second straight world championship, McLaren their fourth straight constructors title. But the fans in Australia were the big losers in this race. Reporting from Adelaide, this is Bob Varsha.
When did McLaren win its first manufacturer's championship? Well, you have to go back a quarter of a century to the late 1960s and to a series that has come and gone. Here's Donald Davidson with another Dick Wallen racing classic.
Round 4 of the 1967 Can-Am series is at Laguna Seca, and naturally Bruce McLaren is here, as is teammate and fellow New Zealander Dennis Hulme, who's just about wrapped up the World Championship for Brabham. Then he succeeds John Surtees, who's also here. Dan Gurney represents the Americans, and Parnelli Jones is here as well. It hardly looks like the same place, does it? Strange without the grandstands. McLaren and Hulme are expected to dominate today, as Danny has won each of the 3 races so far. Yet Dan Gurney comes through to lead the early laps. But typical Gurney luck. He overheats, giving second to Parnelli. Eventually, both will fall out, and Hulme will take over second. Well, Surtees has evidently been in some sort of a shunt. It's the turning point in the season for Hulme. He blows an engine and will drop out of the other 2 races as well. All 3 will be won by McLaren, who will claim the championship. Jim Hall inherits the runner-up spot in his wing Chaparral today, but he's a lap behind at the finish. For Speed Week, this is Donald Davidson.
Welcome to Mountain Man 101. Let's begin. This is a mountain man. Notice his love of great natural beauty, his instinctive resourcefulness, his healthy respect for a fine pair of cowboy boots. However, the easiest way to identify a mountain man is to look at his hands, which will no doubt be holding a smooth bush beer or an easy drinking bush light. So, head for the mountains and learn to live life as a man among men.
Pronto Auto Parts. From coast to coast, your local Pronto Auto Parts store features friendly service and quality auto parts at lower prices.
For some, it's life. To win, all parts must work to perfection. The Motorcraft World Champions win with the same Motorcraft parts you can buy for your car. Motorcraft quality parts from Ford.
When you need quality auto parts, ask the pro at Pronto.
Ground transportation arranged through General Rent-A-Car, where free unlimited mileage and quality Chrysler cars are just 2 of the reasons people on the move are racing to General.
Welcome back to Speed Week on location in Houston. The weather has been great here in Texas, much better than it was in the Midwest last weekend. Let's go to Gary Lee back in our newsroom, who has the story of a championship that ended prematurely.
Well, Bob Usack had a big weekend planned for the Winchester Speedway in Indiana, with both the midgets and sprint cars participating in the Snowball Derby, with a sprint champion to be crowned. On Saturday, in cold but tolerable conditions, Robbie Stanley, the points leader, qualified third fastest, while Eric Gordon, who was trailing Robbie by just 31 points, overcame rear-end problems to qualify seventh. Jim Keeker was the fastest in time trials and was hoping for warmer weather the next day. But instead of a warm-up, it turned colder and even snowed, causing USAC officials to cancel the event and declare Stanley the 1991 Sprint Car champion. The USAC midget title is still up for grabs and will be decided later this month. The World of Outlaws wing sprint cars will do something for the first time in their 14-year existence: race on pavement. A two-day event is planned for this weekend at the new Lakeside Speedway in Kansas City.
This is a test to see whether this will work the way we want to do it. And if it works the way we want to do it, then we will run about 6 asphalt races next year. Now, they will not be in the same point fund with it. We're still a dirt organization, and we still be on the dirt, and the dirt fund will be total and paid out. And then we will run also an added point fund on, and the asphalt points will be kept separate.
Johnson added the drivers will race the same cars they run on dirt. And speaking of World of Outlaw drivers, we found the king of them all, Steve Kinzer, roaming the garage area last weekend at the Winston Cup race in Phoenix. There have been rumors that Steve might be interested in trying stock car racing, but he says he wouldn't do it unless he can hook up with a top-notch competitive team. And finally, a story with irony and controversy. The Mickey Thompson Stadium Off-Road Series has built its reputation on being a rough-and-tumble, rock'em-sock'em series. So when this incident occurred between Ivan Stewart and Rob McCachran on the 6th lap of last weekend's Grand National Truck Feature, no one thought much about it. Stewart went on to win the race, but was later penalized after officials reviewed the tape. As you can see, this impact sent McCachran into the barricade. And Mickey Thompson officials thought Stewart could have slowed to avoid contact. Walker Evans was declared the winner. Earlier, he had clinched the Drivers' Championship. Even had Evans finished second, Dodge would have still clinched the manufacturer's title, which has been won for the past 8 years by Toyota. Bob will return with more of Speed Week from Houston in just a moment.
The little old lady from Pasadena. Everybody's saying that there's nobody meaner than the little old lady from Pasadena. She drives real fast. She drives real hard. She's the terror of a Colorado boulevard. The little old lady from Pasadena.
At Dodge, things are moving very fast.
The little old lady from Pasadena.
The temperature never drops below Xerex. That's very important to remember at a time like this, when your car has been sitting idle, when it's very dark and very deserted and very cold. Oh, thank heavens, you did remember Xerex antifreeze. The temperature never drops below Xerex. And now, Xerex quality doesn't stop with your cooling system. Keep your car ready for the road with Xerex power steering fluid and Xerex brake fluid.
In addition to the CART owners meeting that was held here in Houston earlier this week, it was also the site of the 13th annual CART Championship Banquet. That's where Michael Andretti picked up a $500,000 bonus from PPG Industries, making his total for the year $2.4 million. Jeff Andretti was named Rookie of the Year, and Scott Pruitt was named the Most Improved Driver. And one other note, the number 14 has been retired for A.J. Foyt. Now, he can use it so long as he is a driver and a car owner, but once he retires completely, the number can never be used again. And that will do it for another edition of Speed Week. We'll see you next Thursday night at 7:30 Eastern Time. We leave you with more of the Mickey Thompson Off-Road Grand Prix from Oakland, California. So long, everyone.
Speed Week has been brought to you by Quaker State. The Big Q is one tough motor oil. And by Smooth Bush Beer and Easy Drinking Bush Light.